Hi guys, I'm this movie guy, and today I'm reviewing Star Wars Heir to the Empire. This is the first of a trilogy of books, and the trilogy is often called the Thrawn trilogy, written by Timothy Zahn. And why are they called the Thrawn trilogy? Well, because it's about the new villain, Grand Admiral Thrawn. Because this takes place 5 years after Return of the Jedi, and now of course Darth Vader and the Emperor aren't around anymore, so there is a new Imperial villain called Grand Admiral Thrawn, and people will probably know him the most from Star Wars Rebels, where he was brought back into the canon. Now, it took me long enough to finally read this book, but for me it's like, I want to read everything in the canon. So I read everything in the canon, and then I was like, I want more. Okay, now I can finally get into Legends, because there's a difference between canon and Legends that I'll finally get into in a little bit. I first have to say, like, I initially just heard about the Thrawn character. I saw pictures online of a blue alien with red eyes that was Grand Admiral Thrawn, apparently a big deal. Then people told me a little bit about who he was. Then I read a synopsis about his character on Wikipedia. Pretty extensive synopsis, which is a great read, by the way, alone. But I just recommend reading this trilogy instead of reading that synopsis. Because that's the thing. People have been telling me forever how great these books are and how they are some of the best, if not the best books ever in Star Wars history. So, yeah, of course I have to read them at one point. And of course, now we have Thrawn in Rebels, and he is getting his own book, and I was like, you know what? I can do a review series. I can read the book, or in my case, I listen to the audiobook. So I can get through the audiobook, make a review, next month, the second one, and in March I'll do the third, and then in April I'll get the book, and then I'll review the new Thrawn book, which is canon. Now, I have to explain Legends versus canon, because everything that is canon is essentially everything released after 2014, and it does include the 2008 to 2014 Clone Wars animated series. All those things are canon, and everything before 2014 they've retconned. Simply because there were so many books and games and comics contradicting each other. Like, I only really played a few games, and I already had contradictions in those games alone, and it's really, like, they never really considered everything released canon. Only the movies and the TV shows they considered canon, and heck, they even retconned the 2003 Clone Wars, because it's also a version of Clone Wars, and it's just complicated as shit, I don't know, but in the end they decided to retcon anything released before 2014, except for, of course, the movies and the 2008 animated Clone Wars show. So this book is Legends. This does not take place in the Star Wars universe. But of course a lot of people wish it was, especially because the alternative that we have is Aftermath. If you've seen my recent reviews for the Aftermath novels, you know I'm not a fan of those books. Not really. It's not really good. And that was even before I read Heir to the Empire. Now that I know the alternative, I'm even more upset. Like, why is not Heir to the Empire canon, and why do you have shitty Aftermath books? But hey, whatever, you know. I'm here to review Heir to the Empire and not talk about everything that it sucks in the current canon, because actually most of the current canon I like. It's really Aftermath that I didn't like. This first book, Heir to the Empire, is set 5 years after the Battle of Endor, after Return of the Jedi, and it follows our main cast of characters. So, Luke, Han, Lando, Leia, whatnot. Everyone is just present in this book. And in this case, of course, Darth Vader and the Emperor are gone, so there's one guy, Grand Admiral Thrawn, who was not around during the original trilogy, and they gave a good explanation for why he was not around during the original trilogy. So he's around now, and he is basically the guy who is causing the rebels problems right now. But not the way that you'd expect it to, because Thrawn is a different kind of character. Like, if you've seen Rebels, if you've seen especially like the episode Heroes, there it gets explained the most who Thrawn is. Thrawn is a guy very calculating, a tactical mastermind, because he studies the art and the philosophy and the mindset of a species, and by studying that, he figures out their battle tactics. Usually people will just look at how do they fight and then, okay, we'll just react to that. No. Thrawn studies a species, studies the art of a species to get why a species does what they do. So, in the case of like what we saw in Rebels, he studied the Twi'leks. Like, why do Twi'leks have like a calicori? That is what it happens in Rebels. That's not what happens in this book, but it's essentially what he does. He just goes with like artifacts of a species. He's like, why do you use this? And in the long game, he determines why they use that and how it involves battle tactics. And that is why this is so brilliant. And Thrawn, besides the fact that he is calculating, he can also just kill a guy right on the spot. And it's like, whoa, that just happened. Oh, okay. It's a little bit like Darth Vader is a lot less calculating. He's a lot more like, I just kill people. I mean, Rogue One, everyone. But essentially, like, Thrawn doesn't do that. Thrawn is really calculating, but if he needs to kill someone, he will do that. He will not hesitate to do that. And it's like, Thrawn, I consider as a villain, is a better villain than Darth Vader or the Emperor or anyone else in Star Wars, simply because he combines everything that we've seen in great Star Wars villains and just takes it to the next level. And that is why he is great. Like, my favorite character is of course Darth Vader, but Thrawn as a villain is a better villain than Darth Vader, because Darth Vader basically is a guy who just wants to kill everyone. So Thrawn, the main villain of the story, is great, and I cannot wait to read more about that, of course, in 2 and 3. But besides that, the book, of course, follows the main characters, and really the question is, when you write main characters in a story, do you do the characters justice, or do you ruin the characters? This is doing the characters justice. This is actually adding to the characters some little things that you didn't know yet, which really adds to them, and it's really cool, and it's just done justice. It's like Han Solo is the Han Solo that you know and love. Leia is the Leia that you know and love, and that's with every one of them, and it's like, that's great. That's just exactly how you should do it, because I've read books where they used main characters and didn't do them justice, and that sucks, because yeah, it's just a letdown every time that happens, and it just makes me appreciate the moments like when in Heir to the Empire they're done justice, and I'm like, yes, this is good. A few examples like how they add to the characters in this book is that you have Han and Lando going on a mission together, playing a game of Sabacc, and they explain Sabacc a little bit, and I am someone who has played some casino games. I really like poker and blackjack, so I know how those kind of games work. And apparently Sabacc is very similar to that, so it was really cool to have a little bit of backstory to the Sabacc game, because Sabacc is of course the game that Han beat Lando in to make sure that he gets the Millennium Falcon, which I think this book was the first time to say that. It is brought back into canon, so it's still a version in the current canon, but I think this book was the first to do that. I'm not sure, someone will probably correct me on that, but whatever. It's like, it's really cool to have those little backstories to like Han and Lando. You also get a little bit more to Leia. Like, Leia of course is now pregnant. She's pregnant of twins, but in the meantime she also has to train as a Jedi with a lightsaber, and that's simply because she also has the Force, so she has the same power as Luke. Because, of course, you get the line in Return of the Jedi, like, you have that power too. So they train with that, and it's really cool that they continued that, and that she also kind of learns to use the Force. It's like, they only set it up. It's not really that much explored in this book, but I thought it was cool. I thought it was really cool. I also like had fanboy moments while getting through this book, because you get mentions of planets that I know from the Empire at War game. Like, I played Empire at War a couple of times. I really like that game, and also Forces of Corruption. Like, those games include certain planets that this book started, and for me, I recognize that this book created those planets and then they were brought into the game. But for me, I played the game first, and now I'm reading about it, and it's like, oh my god, it's really cool to have those planets. And I realized that this book actually does a really good job at expanding the universe with more planets, world building. Like, that was really cool. That was awesome to see, to have more worlds and different kind of worlds. And it just adds to the universe. Speaking of adding to the universe, besides Thrawn, it also adds a lot of new characters to the universe, like characters that I had no idea existed. I only know Thrawn, of course, and of course Mara Jade, which is pretty well known to most people, I'd say. If you don't know who Mara Jade is, just look it up on Wikipedia. I won't spoil it, but I know where that is going, because I know too much about Star Wars to not know who Mara Jade is. Mara Jade is pretty popular. So the thing is, I knew Mara Jade, I knew Thrawn, and the rest I didn't know. But it turned out that all of the characters, that there actually are a lot of new characters in this book, and none of them are bad characters. I actually liked all the new and old characters. Like, all characters are essentially well written except for one. There is also a planet introduced in this book that I don't like. It's my one complaint with the book. So I've talked about a lot of good stuff, and I mentioned my complaint. I have one complaint with the book. It's a minor complaint, really, but it's a part of the book. So yeah, it annoyed me a little bit. They go to Kashyyyk. I thought that was a cool idea. Why do they go to Kashyyyk? Not really sure, to be honest. Maybe I missed it. I think I missed it, but in the end, what it does is it gives us a Wookiee that speaks Basic. Basic is English, as in you get a Wookiee that doesn't growl and is not understandable to people. No, he speaks Basic. And I think I would not have as much an issue with it if I had just read the book, but in case of the audiobook, they speak like a Wookiee in Basic, and it's jarring. Oh my god, it was extremely annoying. It really took me out of it a couple of times. It's like a Wookiee speaking Basic. Now, just now, it really does not work. At least for me. That's really my only complaint. So my least favorite part is Kashyyyk. I think this was the first time that they went to Kashyyyk in any medium of Star Wars, because this book was released early 90s. I'm not sure, because heck, there are so many things in Legends that have been explored, so I'm not really sure if Kashyyyk had been introduced before this book, but I think they just added Kashyyyk in this book to please the fans who wanted Kashyyyk in Return of the Jedi, because as most people will know, the original plan for the Battle of Endor was the Battle of Kashyyyk, to go to Kashyyyk to fight with the Wookiees instead of the Ewoks, and that's why people don't like the Ewoks too much, because they prefer the alternative, of course. But really, besides Kashyyyk, this book is great. There's hardly any dull moments, and I have not had that with a book since Lost Stars and Bloodline. Heck, in Catalyst I had moments that I had dull parts when I was reading that, and Bloodline and Lost Stars really kept my attention for the most part. I cannot really remember a part in either Bloodline or Lost Stars that I was bored. So, and this is yet another of that, because when there's action, it's really good, and especially when you listen to the audiobook, you get a little bit of music, a little bit of sound effects in the background to enhance really the idea of battle. And when the narrator also starts to talk a little bit more fast, it's like he talks faster and you get sound effects, and it's like, oh yeah, there's an action scene going. That really adds to the experience. I don't know how that is in the book, but I usually am quite able to experience an action scene by just reading it in the book itself. So I'd say action is pretty good, but when there's no action, it still is really good. When there's no action, when there's dialogue between characters or just some tense moments that happen, it's like really good. It still is, and it's like, wow, this is an extremely well written book. This is amazing. I was not expecting that. I honestly thought there was going to be one part, except for, of course, the Kashyyyk part, that I was like, okay, a little boring, let's pick it up. No, other than the Kashyyyk part, which is a really minor point in the book, honestly, this book is great. It's phenomenal. It's like, wow. One thing, though, that I do have to say, and this is the only reason my grade is not higher, is that it ends on an open ending. It actually sets up for the next book. So I can not give it a higher grade right now up until I read the next two. If the next two are as great as this one, then I will up my grade probably for this one as well. But for now, I will give Heir to the Empire a 9 out of 10. And believe me, if you've not read this book, if you only care about canon, doesn't matter. Read this book. I was one of those people who was like, no, I'm just gonna focus on the canon and I don't really care about Legends, even though I have played games in Legends and I know stuff from Legends. It's like, this is a book you want to read, and just consider this the alternative for Aftermath, because if you, like me, do not like the Aftermath novels, this is what you want to read. This is the story after Return of the Jedi that I think everyone wanted. So that's what I have to say about that. Anyway, now that I have said what I think of it, I wonder, what do you think of it? If you've read Heir to the Empire, do you love it as well? Or maybe you have some issues. I've seen one or two people in my lifetime having a few issues with this book, not loving it as much as others, but I've not seen anyone disliking this book. So that should be an indication for, if you haven't read it, just read it. But still, I wonder, if you have read it, please let me know what you think about it, what stood out for you in this book. Then I'll be back next month somewhere in February, just look out for it, with my review for, I believe it's called Dark Forces Rising, which is the second one in this trilogy, which I cannot wait to start. Now I have to say one thing, because of the fact that I'm now also reviewing Legend stuff, like, I renamed all my videos about Star Wars Canon, because everything I reviewed was canon and this is the first Legends thing. So in the future, if I put up a video, I will explain if it's either canon or Legends, or it will be in the title. So it will be pretty clear what is canon and what's Legends, for if you are confused. You can also find it on Wikipedia. You should be able to notice the difference between canon and Legends pretty well. So that said, if you've liked this review and want to see more of my movie, trailer and Star Wars reviews, you can click right here.